So we were participating in one of the weekend tournaments that VisionGL puts on. We ended up at wave 221 in a hardcore solo league. So we ended up playing kind of a weird build, and I want to go over it because I haven't seen other people play it or talk about it. And I got the biggest compliment from somebody in chat. They said, I've never seen somebody play Detonating Arrow this way. And there might be a reason for that. But listen, I think this build is not just a worse version of something else, which is why it's so exciting. We were farming the Empowered Monoliths, trying to get our blessings. We got to 221 in hardcore solo for this tournament. We're, 3 days into this weekend sprint, and it's been pretty fun. I've enjoyed it a lot. So there were a couple bans for this tournament. For each of these tournaments, there's some bans, and then there's something that's picked, and there's like a mandatory skill. This is what VisionGL has been doing for a long time. I'll put a link to his Discord in the description of this video. So the bans for this tournament, we were not allowed to use Decoy, we were not allowed to use Synchronized Strike, and we're not allowed to use Hail of Arrows. And then for picks, because there's really not that much to begin with, we were just allowed to use whatever we want. We decided to play Bleed, Detonate Arrow. The beginning of this build was I wanted to play Puncture because it's a really nice skill to play, and we were using Multishot, but we were also at the very beginning of this build using Channeled Flurry. So we had all of our channel nodes on the very top left of Flurry, and then all of the adrenaline nodes on the very bottom left of Flurry. So we were trying to apply as many bleeds as we could using Flurry. And yes, it has a reduced chance to apply ailments on hit because it's channeled, because you're hitting so many times, just like Warpath does. But the idea would be like, because we have Flurry, because we have Fusillade to trigger Multishot, and then Multishot is also triggered over here, and there's double shots over here. I was thinking maybe this would be a great way of getting some extra damage in the build. I wasn't sure if Flurry was supposed to be the single target solution alongside Puncture for clear, or maybe Puncture was a single target and Multishot was a thing, or like Channeled Flurry was a thing we were going to use for clear. I wasn't really sure what we were supposed to do, and really we didn't quite get enough clear. We didn't quite get enough single target out of the setup. So instead, we decided to try out Detonating Arrow. So Detonating Arrow does, I guess this is like the first skill we'll go over here. So Detonating Arrow does like one very important thing, right? If we take Barrage, it means that if we shoot one arrow at the enemy, like this, boom. If we shoot one arrow, we have the initial arrow hit, we have the explosion that goes off immediately, and then we also have Arcing Blast. So Arcing Blast, these tendrils over here, they also hit on single target. So every one arrow that we shoot out, it hits 3 times. So we have like, let's say we have 700 chance to apply bleed on hit, which is about what I have on my build right now with all my buffs up and whatnot when I'm in combat. If we have 700 times 3, that's 21 bleeds that we can apply with one shot of our Detonating Arrow, which is pretty slick altogether. So that is how Detonating Arrow is going to be applying our bleeds. We have this node over here, Scorpion Arrow, which is like, it's a really cool node because it has a lot of synergy over the rest of our gear and like the rest of our tree. But like, I don't want to play Poison. So if we played Poison instead, then my Puncture doesn't really do anything. I don't get to use the Mutilate node, which is sweet, and I'll talk about that later. I don't get to use Scalebane because I'd have to have a mana cost on my Puncture over here. With a 15 mana cost, I'd have to use a different skill altogether, and it's just, it's a different build. Also, if you went Poison, you don't get to use Arcing Blasts because those Arcing Blasts are disabled altogether. This has no effect if Detonating Arrow's damage is converted. So the reason that I say this build is not just a bad version of something else is like, well, it's different, right? Instead of playing Poison Detonate Arrow, where you would click on all the nodes that say shock this, shock this, shock this, well, instead, we get to click on nodes that say more damage, right? As long as it doesn't say hit damage, if it's a generic more damage multiplier, that's inherited by the ailment itself, right? So like we're playing bleed, more damage applies to bleed, good. So that's why we're coming all the way down here to concentration. It's why we have Barrage popping immediately. So we're not doing anything like Sucker Punch over here. We're not increasing the mana cost of our skill because it's untenable. Like we can't actually maintain this very well. And then Arcing Blast just as many points over here as possible just to help clean up our clear speed a little bit. If I had 21 points, I would put another point in Arcing Blast. If I had 23 points, I'd put those last 2 into Far Shot over here. Let's talk about Puncture next. So Mutilate is this node down here. We only need 1 point in it. But it says, instead of applying bleed, the greater Puncture, which is every 3rd Puncture, consumes all stacks of bleeds, and it makes the damage happen immediately. So it takes all those damage over times that are stacked up, and they just like boom, and it's one big chunk of damage. And I think it's like a pretty cool playstyle because you kind of detonating arrow 3 or 4 or 5 times to stack up, 20 times 5, 100 bleeds on the enemy, and then boom, they're all consumed at the same time. You get one big burst of damage down here from mutilate. The other things we're doing over here, if we had some extra points, we could consider going over to Scalebane, and I was planning this initially, but I don't have any other sources of poison in my build, so these 1, 2, 3 points that I put over here, instead, I'm just putting them in Perforate, and I think this is great. Then we have 4 points in Bloodthirst, 3 points in Hunger. You see this on most Puncture builds you ever look at, and then 5 points over in Splinter. I don't have Fizz Shred on my build. You will, because your build's going to be better than mine, but for this is good enough for me for shredding enemy resistance. The next thing we'll talk about is Multishot. This is kind of an artifact of how we initially built the build. If you wanted to be extra safe and you weren't in a tournament, you could use Decoy here because Decoy Taunt is busted. In patch 083, I believe Decoy is getting nerfed. This is your flex spot if you want to put anything else in Multishot. My key points here were 1 point all the way over to Readied Arrows so that we can trigger this in other places. The 2 points down here in Repeater Bow so that we can we get this double shot and we get a double more often. And this is just like a more application of bleeds, right? Down here, we have 3 points in piercing shots, just trying to help out our clear speed as much as possible. And then we came all the way over here to Giant Slayer. Sometimes we can stand in front of an enemy and actually get multiple arrows hitting. And multiple arrows means that we get multiple bleeds as well. So it's fine. The other 2 important parts of the build are Shift and Smoke Bomb. Nothing spicy happening here. For Shift, we're coming all the way up to Rebound with a couple points in between. We have all 5 points down here in Elusive. This is a super good node when we have 195 dodge, and when I shift, my 7% is going to go to 77%. So this is just for a short duration, we have an exorbitant amount of dodge percent. So it keeps us nice and safe on a relatively low cooldown with shift. Next up is Smoke Bomb. Smoke Bomb, we came all the way over here for Dust Shrouds happening as often as possible. When we can stand in the Ghost Shroud, when we can stand in the Smoke Bomb and be as tanky as possible, but sometimes just standing in place is a bad idea. So you'll see me in those clips, I'll just like toss down a Smoke Bomb once, and then I'll just book it out of there. And then we go 1, 1, 1 over here, and this brings us to Moonlight Bomb. All we need is 1 point in Moonlight Bomb, and this is why it's still nice that even if you can't stand in the Smoke Bomb, you just toss it down once and you can keep running. So this is just the initial burst granting you Silver Shroud, and then you automatically dodge the next attack. Let's talk about Mastery real quick. We have 43 points into our base class, and then we have 18 over in Blade Dancer just for like some generic defenses, and then 47 into Marksman. So the first couple points that we put in here are like Steady Hand with Dexterity and Life, 1, 5, like 1, 5, 1. You can do 1, 5, 2, 1, 5, 3 like this. But just a little bit of chance to gain haste on hit is really nice. It makes you feel nice and speedy as you're running around. And then this point, I think you want this on every single rogue you play. This is just like a source of less damage taken while moving. And if you're trying to avoid something, you're going to be moving. This is up very, very often, and we have an active play style to suit. Up on the top, we have 8, 4, 5. This could be 8, 5, 5 as well. Just attack speed. Every third attack does extra damage, and this is inherited by bleed as well. And then every third non-channeled throwing or bow attack also inflicts bleed. So we have 3 extra stacks of bleed coming in here. So we have like 21 bleeds. Maybe that goes up to 24 bleeds. We have 5 points in dodge and parry. This is awesome. This is glancing blow chance as well. And then at first, I put 2 points in here into sapping strikes. And then as I was leveling through like 93, 94, 95, I put more points in here, up to 4 out of 4 for sapping strikes, just to make it so that I could regain mana a little bit faster and have a smoother playstyle. I experimented with coated blades. I would need a lot more mana regen for me to feel comfortable with this. Yeah, this is a ton of damage. It's 10% more damage with 5 mana cost here. You can do this, but for me, I didn't think it was worthwhile because I wanted a smooth playstyle and I didn't ever want to run out of mana. Because if I need to dash or if I need to smoke bomb or something like that in hardcore, I didn't like it. But you could try like maybe 1 point. Blade Dancer is an easy tree to talk about. We have 8, 2, and 8. These 2 are just so that we can bridge the gap to get over to the right side. We have Glancing Blow chance here and Dust Shrouds when hit. This is great. And then just a couple points here for global damage over time. All right, on to the beef of it. We've got Marksman. We have a couple points here, and these 2 points in concentration help us to move all the way to the right side. Because there's really not too much stuff in the middle here that we want, because we're not a crit build, we're not a crit multi build, and we're not an elemental build. So all of those things kind of miss us. And that's what all the rest of these points would be otherwise. So we have 8 out of 8 in Draining Arrows for some attack speed, 8 out of 8 for dexterity and dodge debuff rating. Makes it so that we can run enemies have a chance to dodge monoliths relatively easily. 2 points here just for fluff, and then 8 points here for damage over time, which is great. And then all the way on the right side, we have the relevant damage nodes for the build. So we have 10 out of 10 for chance to inflict bleed on bow hit. And then we also have a couple points into this. You could do 4 or 5, you could do 7 like I do as well. And this is a little bit of damage. It's maybe like 5% damage per point or so with my current setup, because I'm not jacking up the mana cost of my skills, but it gives some mana regeneration as well, which helps me feel good for kiting around while I'm doing arena stuff. And then we do have 2 points here, and this feels excellent. The Detonating Arrow explosion area gives you everything that you would want for clear speed, etc. And then the last bits are 1 point here and 1 point here. All we want is when you proc Arrow Storm, you gain Silver Shroud, and Silver Shroud is a chance to dodge the next hit. We don't need anything else, just 1 point here, just 1 point here, and that's good to go. Let's talk real quick about the gear. The gear is, in my opinion, incredibly lackluster. But it is what it is, right? We have a little bit of damage over time. We have all of our resistances capped. A little bit of damage over time, a little bit of damage while wielding a bow. Lots of chance to bleed on hit and chance to bleed on bow hit. And then physical damage, dexterity, stuff like that. So I'll just hug over the gear. There's not too much. We have a bunch of life. It'd be nice if the mana were gone and we use something else instead, but it is what it is. On our chest piece, we have a whole bunch of life and a little bit of damage while wielding a bow. On our bow here, we have a 1.1 attack speed base, which is pretty nice. This is the obsidian bow. And then it has a nice implicit of 40 to 100 increased physical damage. Remember, increased physical damage applies to bleed too, which is great. And then we have bow attack speed and bow physical damage, along with tier 5 chance to bleed on hit. We have some exalted chance to bleed on hit over here, along with a little bit of physical damage, a little bit of physical resistance. Fizz damage, damage over time, res on a vitality base to give us a nice 2,000 life total up here. We have some damage over time and physical damage, about 100% increased physical damage over here. Then for our gloves, we were able to get a Void Res blessing from Raye. Before we got the Void Res blessing, we were using a pair of Void Res gloves. I forget what those gloves base are called. But now that we're using an engraved glove, it gives us a little bit of extra endurance. So we're up at 35% endurance. And then we have, again, damage over time, dexterity, health, percent health, things like that. The boots we ended up with were pretty good. We gambled a tier 17 boot and then worked it up to a tier 20, which is incredibly lucky. So this is vitality. So it's like life, crit avoid, movement speed, everything you want. And before we gambled a Valdir's Chalice, we were using the, I think they're called ivory rings. Yeah, we're using ruby rings before this. So a little bit of physical damage, damage over time, res, and then the implicit has chance to bleed on hit, but it also has a big chunk of fire resistance. So while you're first getting started out, if you do choose to play something like this, having a 36 to 42 fire res on your relic is a really good place to be. But eventually, we worked our resistances into a good spot, and then we worked Valdir's into the build as well. Last thing we'll talk about is idols. We have a couple idols up here that make sense. We got one 2x2, and then a couple other things for like life, res, just to round things out. We have damage over time and chance to bleed on hit, which is great. And then Detonating Arrow area with bleed on hit, and another of the same, Detonating Arrow area along with bleed on hit. This just makes our clear nice and big, along with the tendrils that shoot out and help us to hit as many targets as possible, which is great. This is bow attack speed, chance to bleed on hit, and then just life. I'm really happy that we ended up using a Detonating Arrow setup as well. It worked out way better than I thought it was going to. I'm glad that we found a build that is kind of, it's like off meta. It still works perfectly well. It's a well-justified build. All these like pieces are working together, and it's not just a bad version of something else. If I found a sweet new build and I felt like it's just a worse version of a build that already exists that everybody knows about, I wouldn't be particularly excited. That's not the kind of build that I want to share with you. But this is like a bleed, detonate arrow. It's a new way of playing a skill that I haven't seen before. And it's been super fun. I've really enjoyed playing this. It seems like people in chat here on Twitch enjoyed watching it as well. We pushed up to 221 like we talked about earlier on. We're probably going to get dethroned in the next half an hour by somebody who pushes past us in hardcore here. I think it's safe to say that we're in the top 5 for this weekend sprint in the tournament here. So it's been a good time. We're going to keep putting this character together a little bit more before we shelf it. But this character will be transferred over to softcore, and then once 083 comes out, we'll gamble. We'll try to find some Salt Wound, and then we'll pick this character back up and see where it takes us. So if you have any questions, you can jump onto Twitch. It's twitch.tv/PerryThePig. You can also go like Discord or Twitter. I'll leave those links in the description below this video. Or you can just comment here. So I've been pretty good about responding to comments here on YouTube. The best place to talk to me is probably live on Twitch or on Discord, but I've been pretty good about responding to all the comments that do show up here. So thanks for being here. Appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.